Welcome to Vetted VA Live, where we get together every week and go through important issues that veterans need to know when using their mortgage benefit and buying and selling real estate. So we're going to talk tonight about using your VA benefit for a purchase. We're at that time of year where we're looking at New Year's resolutions. A lot of people start thinking, hey, in the new year, in the spring buying season, I'm going to buy. And if you're a veteran, you may not know where to start. One of the things we're going to start the show out with tonight is talking about a study that just came out that VA loan usage is absolutely on the rise. Total volume for VA loans jumped 27% last year with an 8% in purchases. Gen Z led the way with that, with 38% more VA home purchases than the year before. So more service members and veterans are realizing the VA loan isn't just a benefit, it's one of the most powerful tools you have to build a secure financial future. So here's the thing. Too many people are still being talked out of it. We get lenders that don't understand the program, realtors, and they try to talk you into going a different direction because they simply don't understand the program. So tonight, we've got three experts with us. I've got Jerry Avila in Ventura. I've got Randy Tickle in Salina, Texas, and Jessica Wells in Olympia, Washington. So we've got all your bases covered. We're going to go through everything you need to know about using your VA benefit to purchase. So actually, before we jump into what veterans need to know, why don't we talk a little bit about this? I know all of us, VA loans are a focus of our mortgage businesses. So we're seeing more VA business. But Jerry, why do you think we're seeing those year-over-year number increases of veterans using their VA mortgage or those using their VA mortgage to get into a home?
So I think partially it has to do a little bit with some of the work that we're doing, right, with our community in Vetted VA. We do a lot to educate our consumers, and a lot of these veterans that maybe before weren't educated or knowledgeable about their own benefit and didn't even really utilize their benefit, right? Because if I recall the statistic from last year, I think it was something like 13% or so that were utilizing their benefit, that or even knew about their benefit or something like that. It's a very minimal number, and really I feel like that has started to shift. That has now, through education, through the use of people using ChatGPT, it's not always accurate, but at least they're getting more knowledgeable in regards to their own benefit. And then they come to groups like Vetted VA, and they learn from the experts that are willing to share all the information based off of real life situations and scenarios. And I feel like that's part of the reason why you're seeing an influx. But I mean, you also are seeing a generational shift, right, of a new generation coming in and becoming big heavy hitters in the workforce. And that's also what's creating that opportunity for them to walk right into this space.
And when we talk about those generational changes, do you see any differences? So Jessica, you're there for us in Southern California. It's been 30, 40 years since most of our bases got shut down. We got a few left, but not nearly as many as we had in the past. But you're right there. I always want to call it Fort Lewis, but what do they changed the name? What is it now?
Joint Base Lewis McChord now is the
it's not nearly as easy as saying Fort Lewis, but you're there with a lot of active duty, a lot of younger folks. Are you seeing more young buyers, Gen Z, using their VA benefit to get into homes?
I am. I've helped several in the last 6-9 months that are buying even like 3 and 4 bedroom houses so they can live, even single active duty members buying these houses and then renting the rooms out to their other soldiers and things. So it's something that I've seen quite a big increase in the last year or so of like younger buyers coming in. When I see that their age starts in the 2000s, I'm like, what is happening?
That's funny, though. I hadn't really thought about this. You hear house hacking. So the veteran still needs to qualify. We can't use the rent from those other rooms. But a lot of times people worry and they go, hey, if I have to PCS out of here in a year, am I going to be underwater? What do I do? Do I have to sell? A lot of areas that are more affordable, a lot of soldiers that may want to live off base, you probably could do a really good job of getting some nice rents for other soldiers that would rather live off base in a home than in an apartment. So that's a pretty effective way of using the program to acquire an asset that will appreciate over time and use other people's money to help pay it down. Randy, how's that meshing this report with what you're seeing in the great state of Texas?
Well, one of the things I'm seeing is like this week I got calls from 3 different folks PCSing into Texas from elsewhere, and they were all active duty younger folks that were, you know, fairly new in the service, etc. I think between 4 and 8 years and ongoing, and I think that is something that I don't I haven't seen that as much in the past, where that there's like younger folks taking advantage, and all three of these, it was the first time that they will have used it. So it just felt like it was a great trend, and I was really honored to help these guys.
Absolutely. And, you know, there is, Jerry, you had talked about whether it's GPT, whether it's Googling, all roads lead to a couple of places, and veterans have been misled to think that these are places that really have their best interest at heart. Don't just go to that one source. I always tell people, no problem. Talk to anyone you want to talk to, but trust but verify. So confirm, run some numbers and see what it looks like, because biggest doesn't equal the best in terms of most expertise and generally best terms for you as a veteran either. So definitely do your due diligence on that. But when we're talking about this, we're talking about this trend, this wave, and then the trend every year we get into the fourth quarter, people start making plans for next year and New Year's resolutions. And oftentimes that I want to buy my next home. I want to buy my first home. So with the VA loan, it really starts with eligibility and that certificate of eligibility. That's the golden ticket that says that I can use my VA benefit to buy, and it tells your lender a lot. Jerry, why don't we talk a little bit about eligibility, getting that COE, what that process is, and why it is really, really, really important to have that in hand before you start talking about getting pre-approved.
Sure. I mean, when it comes down to your certificate of eligibility, it's the one document that says to us as loan officers, you are eligible for your VA home loan benefit. There's times where, you know, you may have people who are reservists, right? Been doing that for a while, but don't have the full time of service, or have been moved into active duty long enough to qualify. And if you start the ball rolling on those individuals and then they start spending money, you have now a veteran who is about to find out, or an active duty service member is about to find out they're not eligible. And then that falls on you for not having done the research beforehand, before they even start going home shopping. So there cannot even be a pre-approval letter if you have not gotten your certificate of eligibility, period. It is the one thing that tells us, hey, the VA is going to guarantee a portion of your loan no matter what happens. And that's what tells us, okay, we can go ahead and move forward. If we don't have that, there shouldn't be any movement forward until that happens.
And most veterans know. Was it what, 80, 90%? Yes, I'm eligible. I've got a VA loan before. I have a certificate of eligibility in hand, but we do get calls from people. I think I'm eligible. I'm a reservist. I think I meet the requirements. So sometimes it's a little bit of research, but doing that on the front end prevents stress, because it still boggles my mind when I get that panicked call from someone that they're 3 weeks into a 30-day escrow and they're like, no one can get a certificate of eligibility, or they're saying the records are in mothballs somewhere and we can't get it. Like, it makes it difficult and stressful. And I think we've all seen people have to take an FHA or a conventional loan, come up with a down payment at the 11th hour because they couldn't get that. So super important to do it on the front end. I would say, and I think this has shifted, this Randy, you may be as old as me and doing this stuff long enough. I remember way back in the 90s, if you had a veteran, you'd say, okay, do you have a certificate of eligibility? And they say, no, I do not. Okay, do you have your DD-214? Then we had this crazy form. We could mail it off and wait 6 months and hope that the COE came back. Or we could go down and wait and stand in line at the VA and wait to get that COE, which most times we had to, because we didn't want to wait forever for it to come back in the mail. But for all three of you, what percentage of your veterans come with COE in hand? And if they don't, how can they get it? Or do you just tell them, don't worry, we're going to log into WebLGY and get it ourselves? I would say for my team, it's probably less than 30% of the time does the veteran have it. And most of the time we just jump in and pull it for them. Does that match up with how you guys handle it?
Yeah, I got to say mine's probably like about 5% coming. Like, the veterans come with their own. Otherwise, I'm pulling almost all of them.
What if someone, so Jessica, what if someone is thinking of buying next year? They don't want to talk to a lender yet. I'm going to do this in the spring. I'm going to get serious, June of next year. But they do want to confirm their eligibility early. What's the best way for a veteran to do it if they're not working with a lender who can jump in and do it for them?
Yeah, if you're not working with a lender, you can log in. I believe it's eBenefits that you can log into. I always get that wrong, but it's eBenefits that they can log into, and then you can pull your own certificate of eligibility just as quickly as we can get it through them. And then it will tell them if the certificate is available. Sometimes they'll have to fill out some additional information to get the certificate of eligibility. And I would say if you run into issues with that, call the RLC or reach out to a vetted VA professional in your area. They are all willing just to help you grab your COE, if nothing else, just to keep things rolling for you. Because like Jerry said, it is the most important piece of the loan.
Nothing happens without it. So it is the first part in your journey. But Randy, why don't we say veteran wants to buy a home, they have that COE in hand. Let's walk them through getting pre-approved. What does that mean? Because one of the things, I'm sure you guys are just like me, I get people all the time, many first-time buyers, never used their VA benefit before, or if they're a non-veteran, regardless, and say, I want to buy a home. And then they follow up with, I don't know where to start, and I do not know what that means. So, Randy, when you're dealing with someone who's early in the process and just wants a walkthrough, an overview of what that looks like and how we're going to start with that pre-approval, what does that look like?
Well, for me, I want to get the 30,000 foot view with them. And I go back to, like you say, way back when, where we're going to get the old 3 C's of character, collateral, and we go through the individual steps of, number one, where does your money come from? Obviously, the very, very first thing for a VA loan is how long have you been where, what do you know? If they don't know what a COE is, then we educate them about what that certificate of eligibility shows. But the bottom line is to find out if they've ever used it before, and if not, to get them to the point where that they understand what that COE is going to tell them, and explain to them. Everybody gets the $36,000 panics on them because they don't want to buy a house for $36,000. So explain to them that no, that's still really goes all the way back to where that $144,000 was a typical home, which we're way past that nowadays. And then I walk them through how much they make, how much they spend, what their budget is, and how well they pay everybody, and we put all that together with, like I said, the 30,000 foot view that tells them basically what they can afford, and oftentimes what they can afford and what they qualify for aren't the same thing, because what they can afford is more what they're comfortable with in most cases. Like I just had someone that I qualified Friday, and they came to me and said, well, we want to see what we can afford. And so I did a pre-qual with them, and it was obvious that they qualified for about $800,000, and told them basically that's where you're at.
What did they think about the payment for the $800,000? Did they like that? Did they feel they could afford that?
They were backpedaling so fast that they could have covered anyone in the NFL about, no, that's not what we're interested in at all. So 350, 400 maybe. And so the good thing is you're going to qualify easily for 2 times that, pretty much comfortably. And they're not looking to buy until they PCS in April, but it was just a matter of putting everything together. And in this particular case, because they were 5 months out, we did a soft pull, and but we still used all the same stuff. We used the BAH from the new station. We used all the things that put them where they were. But more than anything, it made them real comfortable with the fact that they're not going to be stressed out in March when they start looking for that home, that they're all easy. And there wasn't anything for these people to do. Sometimes there is. So the advantage to doing a soft pull in December for an April or May move is that if there's anything that needs to be taken care of, they can. And I had one last week like that. It turned out there was kind of an interesting situation. It was a younger guy, and he had a authorized user account on his account that was probably a parent that had helped him, and it turned out that it got him started, got him have credit, but now the parent must have run into some hard times, and they were $6,000 on a $5,500 limit and whatever, and so it was just a simple thing to have them taking it off. But the time to do that is now, not in April when they're trying to absolutely buy. So,
well, Randy, you talked about something really important that is one of the biggest benefits and the greatest power or superpower of the VA loan, and why we talk about, for most veterans, it is vast majority, 95, 98, 99%. It is the option when you are VA eligible, and that's the difference between what you can qualify for and what you can afford. So you talk about this side, when we talk to borrowers, we often within the VA guidelines can get them qualified for much more than they feel they can afford. But oftentimes we have other folks. The best example I like to use, I have a veteran probably just before COVID, 2019. We were able to get him into a condo with a 72% debt to income ratio. And people go, that's insane. That person, he lost the home to foreclosure, right? We said, no. He had been divorced and he now had a girlfriend. She made just as much money as he did. The girlfriend can't go on the loan and do a zero down. So he qualified. We were able to get him there. So that qualify versus afford, in his mind, he could afford a 72% debt to income ratio because there was some, and we all have stories like this. So there's things where that power, the VA loan, gives much greater flexibility to the borrower than almost any other loan program. So it is one of the VA loan's superpower. Jerry, why don't you walk us through? So instead of debt to income, where FHA loan says maximum 57% all in debt to income, maximum 50 on a conventional, why doesn't VA have that hard line? And why does it sometimes lead us to tell borrowers they qualify for 800 when they're comfortable with 350?
So it all comes down to residual income calculation, not debt to income ratio. Debt to income ratio could be factoring out a bunch of other expenses that aren't really true to your full picture, right? They're only taking into account your credit, your actual liabilities that you have on your credit report, nothing that is affiliated to the home yet, right? So your utilities, maintenance, all that stuff that's going to be also taken into consideration on a residual income calculation, but it's not taken into consideration when you're talking about debt to income because it doesn't pop up on your credit report. So those are like really some of the easy, simple key factors to identify the differences between DTI and residual. So when you have the residual and you can afford it up until that dollar amount, right? So they go based off of square footage of the house. So let's say, it's a certain square footage and they only use 14 cents per square foot of that to qualify you. So all of that all those numbers have to equate to you still having enough money left over every month based off of the residual the residual chart for your home size to your income, and everything has to still equate at the end that you still have a surplus. If there is any negative there have to be compensating factors that they can say, oh, okay, in this case, like you were mentioning your client, having that additional party, having income coming in, and just being somebody who's going to be taking off the plate some of the expenses every month will automatically help in the qualification. So they won't count it as income, but they'll at least count it as a compensating factor when you start pushing that DTI number higher, especially if you're going into a manual review and it's not an automatic approval. Those compensating factors are going to matter.
Absolutely. And it does. It just gives so much flexibility to the underwriter to look a little bit more holistically, where almost all of our other loan programs are more cut and dried. Jessica, we talked about the certificate of eligibility. It's important that you have it in hand because it says yes or no. Are you eligible? Are you not? But there's a bunch of other information on there. Randy talked about 36,000 basic entitlement. But what are the other things that we're looking for when you get that veteran certificate of eligibility? What are the things that you want to review and see on there, and what do they mean for the borrower?
Yeah, one of the first things I always look at is up in the top right-hand corner of your certificate. It's going to tell you whether you're exempt from the funding fee or not. And that's going to be a big thing. And it's beneficial for those that are exempt, and it saves a bunch of money for them. And then on top of that, you can scroll down and see if it's a subsequent use, if they've used their VA funding fee before, and how much money that they are getting monthly. If they do have some sort of disability payment, it will tell you. I mean, there's been cases that I've seen where somebody is exempt from the funding fee, but they're not getting any monthly disability payment. And then there have been cases where people have use their VA funding fee, so they're on subsequent use, and you'll see that they either still have that home. It'll show on the entitlement there. I had one today that I was just looking at that he has 2 pieces of entitlement held. One of them is from a foreclosure deed in lieu that was from 2011. And then one of them is for his active current house that he has right now. So even with those 2 houses that he has on there, I can do my bonus entitlement calculation and see how much he qualifies for with no down payment for a 3rd home, basically, without having to do anything with that foreclosure because the time has passed since then. So there's really a lot of information that we gather from the COE just right off the top.
I thought I was the only one. I got a borrower here recently, same thing, 2009, had lost the home, and we're looking at it and going through. So it's important for you guys to know that if that was you, if you owned a home, it's crazy to say 20 years ago, but we're closing in on 20 years ago, 15, 18 years ago, went through that, that you can use bonus entitlement even if you lost a home and the VA suffered a loss. You know, if you make them whole, you can restore your entitlement, but very few people do that, but we can use that bonus entitlement. Do we want?
I was just going to say that was something that I was talking to my client today about, because I told him you have the option. He wanted to buy a bigger purchase price, so he was going up. I think he qualified at 450. He wanted to go to 850. And so I said, well, you have the option to reach out to the VA and make them whole again, because it's not necessarily the full amount of the loan that you have to pay back on that to get your entitlement restored for that piece. It's just whatever the loss to the VA was. And sometimes that is cheaper than having to do a down payment on your bonus entitlement.
Well, let's maybe talk about that, and I'll throw my example out here because it's a real good one. Where he was at, he could go to 700, and with the 2026 loan limits, he could go to 796 with zero down. Where he's looking, unlike Randy's client, he needs to get to 850 to 950. So we go through that, and at 900, it's like $46,000 that he needs to put down, somewhere in that line. So what might a claim have been paid? I mean, we don't know going back 17, 18 years, but you can reach out to the VA, you can find out what they paid off on that claim. And if it's less than $46,000, I mean, the difference would be if my client makes that $46,000 down payment, that's equity in the property. Whereas if he makes the VA whole, maybe that's $18,000, but it's not equity that he has in the home. But you definitely have options here. And as we talk through all this nerd stuff that nerdy VA loan officers know and can go through, it just reminds me of why it really, really does matter who you're working with. Someone can say, I work for a company with veterans in the name, but they've done loans for 6 months, 2 years. They don't know all of these guidelines. It's churn and burn. Let's generate as many leads as possible, talk to as many veterans as we can, and most of them are very easy. 7, 8 out of 10 are simple, easy ones that even a new loan officer can walk you through. But these weird, arcane situations is what we go through every day. And if you have one of those and you want to talk, we definitely can help you here. Go to vettedva.com, go to the map, find someone local to you, and reach out and go through those questions. Randy, let's say we get to this point. You have the full, you're eligible. We have the full pre-approval, and you're out with your agent and you start writing offers. One of the things that we all hear is we're being told that no one wants to accept a VA offer. There are lots of myths, misunderstandings out there. How are you fighting against that? And what do both the borrower and their real estate agent need to know to be able to combat some of those myths and misunderstandings?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you need to be working with a team of folks that are experienced to begin with and are passionate about the product, because I guarantee it makes a huge difference in the delivery from agent to agent if that agent has a lot of experience and passion about the VA loan. And then secondly, what I try to get them to do is to interact with them on every offer where that I'm interacting with the selling agent and just having a quick conversation in it, because it's typically ignorance that put these people in this position. Because over the years, way back when, like you talked about, the VA had some issues and there were appraisal issues and some different things. But and so some of these agents, like I just did a class last summer, and an agent came to it because I invited them to come, but they'd never really done a lot of VA loans, and he was one of the predominant agents in my market for listings. And at the end of our CE class, he said, "Oh my goodness, I've been doing it wrong for 25 years." And I said, "Why have you been doing it wrong that long?" He said, "Because that's how my broker trained me." And so a lot of times it's just generational things that they don't really understand it, etc. Or somebody somewhere else had one little issue and they passed it along as if it was gospel. So it's just the ignorance, I think, for the most part, that and I don't mean that ugly, but usually that's what it boils down to, is if you can educate them, give a few minutes with them, you can turn somebody most times into someone that's more willing to accept those offers. And then sometimes there's other tricks that they do, like maybe make the earnest money a little bit bigger or whatever. You just different things in the market that are going to make it a little bit more acceptable. Because if you're going out there and the standard in the market is to put 1% of the purchase price down as earnest money, and you're offering $100, then that's kind of counterproductive to, because the next offer is not going to be that way.
Well, that leads us to probably one of the biggest misconceptions, one of the most common questions in the Vetted VA group on Facebook. Why, if I'm using a zero down loan, Jerry, are they asking me to write them $1,000 check, a $5,000 check, a $10,000 check? I'm a veteran. I don't have to make a down payment. Walk us through it.
Because at the end of the day, you still have costs that are associated with the VA loan, right? It doesn't matter that it's free down payment. Like there's no down payment. So it's not that it's a free loan, right? I think that's the confusion that happens a lot of times, especially as they are just getting to know their benefit. They think, oh, it's zero down. I got no down payment. It means I don't have to come out of pocket for anything. Seller has to pay everything. It doesn't work that way. There still has to also be a amount of money that I say 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you're probably going to end up having to put something down, whether it be $500, $1,000, $3,000, whatever is customary for your area for an earnest money deposit, because that is there just to show proof. Like, hey, I am a legit buyer here. I am actually trying to show you that I'm willing to put money on the line here, even though that I'm not even required to actually have a down payment. And yes, I mean, at the end of the day, you still have closing costs. So if there's any excess amounts that, let's just say you get seller concessions or whatnot, those seller concessions may still have a gap there between what you have in fees and what you actually, what you actually got in coverage from the seller concessions. So in those differences, that earnest money that you gave just offset portion or all of that remaining portion, or you might have got everything covered and then you get that back at the end. So the seller concessions, or I'm sorry, the earnest money deposit in itself is going to be just a way for you to prove to the seller that, hey, I am also willing to put money on the line. I'm willing to go ahead and take a step forward here and give a portion of my money to hold this house under contract here as a show of good faith.
And one of the things that Randy hinted at is that is part of the negotiation, right? So we need to know what kind of market we're in. If we're in the middle of 2021 and home prices are going bonkers and every house gets 35 offers, and you go in and, hey, I'd like to give you $100 deposit and I'd like you to pay all my closing costs and I'm going to put zero down, they're going to laugh you out of the house. If you're in a market where a home's been on the market for 180 days, they're getting desperate for an offer, they may be open to you walking in and saying, here's how we'd like to structure it. We think your house will appraise for $300,000. My closing costs are going to be $11,000. I would like you to pay that. I'm a veteran. I don't have to make a down payment and I don't have a lot of money. I want you to know I'm serious. I'll make $1,000 earnest money deposit, a $500 earnest money deposit. There is no standard. No one can tell you this is what you have to do. It is all open in negotiation. So the difference becomes, are we in a market where the sellers have all the power and you need to be as strong as possible? Or are you on the flip side in a market where buyers have a lot of power and you say, hey, here's what I'm able to do. I'm a veteran. I would like to use my benefit. Are you willing to cooperate and work with me? And most people are pretty cool, depending on their options. If they've got 10 other people lined up wanting to make a $50,000 deposit or close in cash in 5 days, that changes that equation. But most parts of the country are not that market right now. So it is a super important part to know. Jessica, one of the other fun, crazy, weird parts, probably one of the biggest misconceptions, is that VA appraisal process. People go, hey, I'm trying to submit an offer and this property is not in the best shape and the agent is really hesitant, or the seller is really hesitant to accept my offer. So they're like, oh, my house is not in good shape. The furnace could go at any time. Is that a real problem? Is that a real concern? And how different is that VA appraisal process from other loan types?
Yeah, so what the VA is looking for is the minimum property requirements, the MPRs. This whole chapter in the handbook that goes over what they're looking at in there, it's mostly just health and safety stuff. And when I have an agent that's saying, well, I don't think this will go VA, it won't meet the appraisal requirements, I tell them, why are you trying to put my veteran in a home that's not safe then? Like, if it's not going to go VA, I'm not going to flip it to conventional just because they don't want, there's lead-based paint or broken window or whatever it is. I've also had one property that we appraised VA. We ended up needing to go conventional because of other reasons. The conventional appraisal came in with more conditions on it than the VA appraisal did when I had our trial done. So just because you're going VA doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a problem. Now, if there are safety issues, those do have to be fixed. It needs to be safe and sound for the veteran to live in it. And it's the most common things that we see are like handrails on stairs or some peeling paint, or it's usually little things that don't take much to fix, because as a seller, you're going to want your house to be in the best shape possible to get the best value out of it. So most of these things, and I've encouraged anybody I'm talking to that's going to sell their house to take a look at it. Do an inspection on your house as the seller before you even list it, to see what's going to be found on somebody's inspection, because you don't want to be blindsided. And then as a buyer, I always recommend looking at an inspection for that house, because that's outside of the VA appraisal process. That's for your own personal. That's like getting your car looked at to know, you want to know if the bones of the house are good. Is there an electrical issue? Is that HVAC going to go out? Sometimes you find out that, hey, it only has 6 months left on this. Sometimes you can work it out so the seller actually replaces it for you as part of the closing too. There's all kinds of options for repairs that can be done with the VA appraisal. My other very favorite part of the VA appraisal is the auction process. And if the appraisal is going to come in low for some reason, the appraiser is required to call Tidewater, which means that, hey, I can't find the comps for this property. You and your agents have 3 business days to get me comps, and you can provide him comps of why you feel that it's worth that. And that's your first option to get the value where you need it. Now it comes in, say the appraisal still comes in low. Now you have a second option to go directly to the VA and have the veteran write a letter and tell the VA why they feel they need this property, why they feel it's worth whatever they're paying for it. And the VA can override what the appraiser says and update the value. I just had one that we closed on this week, actually, that the VA increased the value $25,000 in our ROV process, just because we wrote a letter from the veteran and explained why it should be worth it, even after the appraiser himself did not increase the value.
Well, you just said something important. The veteran wrote a letter as to why they thought it was did you have comps that supported a higher value? Did you go and say, hey, the appraiser didn't like this one, I think this one is it? Because I have one. We just got our ROV back on one this morning. It was a really unique and interesting one. So I want to tell that story, but how did it work out on yours? Did they just take the letter, or did you guys give them some comps as well?
We took we had some comps. It was kind of also a unique situation where the home had basically an ADU, but it was inside the house. But the problem was there was no access from inside the house. You had to go around outside to get into it. And so we used that as part of the reason why it should be worth more value. There was actually more square feet. I would not say that the comps necessarily supported the value we were trying to get, but we did get it increased enough to make the deal work. So it was an interesting situation.
That's an interesting situation and a very important and unique detail. So when we're talking about the flexibility of the VA loan, she just said, I don't know that it really supported or was comparable in terms of value. I don't know of any other loan program that will say on the appraisal, it is okay that we don't have comparables. So I'll give you guys the example I have. We had one come in $27,000 low, and beautiful home. So I'm like, suburban home in Florida. So I'm like, there's not going to be any problems with this. When it came in low, it kind of caught me off guard. Well, I called the agent. He goes, awesome. I'm like, awesome. He goes, yeah, we're going to go back renegotiate with these guys. They need to come down lower. And I said, okay. Well, we have the Tidewater, and it went to the listing agent as well. So we don't get to just go, oh, we're going to deal with it. She provided some comps. Obviously they weren't very good. I asked our agent, I said, hey, can you give me some comps? And he sends over a link from the MLS. And I said, you realize none of these are within $50,000 of our sale price. And his response is, yeah, ours is bigger. So on a price per square foot, ours is cheaper. Without boring you guys who don't deal with it, that's not how it works. We don't get to just say, oh, better price per square foot. So I start talking to him and I said, what's going on here? He goes, smaller development, surrounded by much nicer developments. So this is far and away the biggest one with the nicest pool. It is the nicest home in the neighborhood. And the veteran agreed and saw that. So when we looked at the comps that the listing agent sent, she sent one just outside of this development that was on a golf course. Well, that's problematic because people like living on golf courses. They'll pay more for that. She sent one over that was waterfront. People like living on the water. They'll pay more for waterfront. And all of those happen to be nicer homes. So I go back to the veteran. I went to our agent. They're like, yeah, that's true. It's surrounded by much nicer, much more expensive homes. And in our development is cheaper homes with one really nice house. So we had to go back to the VA and say, here's our request for reconsideration of value. There are no additional comps. The veteran believes this is the biggest, nicest home in this development. The price per square foot is supported. It is improved over the other ones in the neighborhood, and it's surrounded by homes at much higher price points. So he understands what he's doing, and he's accepting this price. And they came back and said, no problem. And you're like, there's no other loan that works with. So we have to hear from realtors and sellers, that VA appraisal process. I'm like, you should pray you get to have that VA appraisal process, because nothing is as close to the type of flexibility that we have. But working our way through everything here, some of the things that are the absolute most important that I'm sure you guys get to see, just like I do, that veterans will come through and say, hey, I've been pre-approved. Okay, cool. What was the interest rate? I don't know. Okay, cool. Do you know what the payment was? No, I don't know. I said, okay, well, you don't know your rate or your payment. I don't know how you could be comfortable with either one. But so how about this? Did they at least tell you how much money you need at closing? Much like we just talked about, that you said, I have no idea. Okay, so that is a very important part of that pre-approval process, so that you know going in that it's Randy can get you approved for 800, but you're comfortable at 400, and you also need to know how much money that takes. So walk us through that, Randy. What does your pre-approval process look like? What does that borrower get in terms of a breakdown? How accurate is that when we're just at that pre-approval process? How much can change, and what can we do to minimize that?
And again, going back to the thing that I do, which is to work on each individual offer to begin with. When we had that $400,000 conversation, I asked them if they have any idea of a property that we could grab. In this particular case, they weren't exempt from property taxes, etc. So we're going to use the neighborhood's taxes and plug in for 400,000, and I'm going to work up what I call a fee sheet. And again, we're 5 months out, right? But I still would do the same if they're just now shopping. And do the fee sheet with a template that I can work through a little bit to give them an idea of, here's basically your payment. Again, I call it spitball because that's what it is. Here's your basic payment. Here's your basic cash to close. And like when Jerry's talking about seller concessions, this is what, if you're asking for seller concessions, ask for the sky. Here's $12,000. That's what you're asking for. Okay. Otherwise, you've got to have those funds coming from somewhere. Doesn't have to come from you. It can come from the seller. You're going to have to be a little bit more patient on that. You're not going to go to an open house on the weekend that the house hits the market and give you $12,000. But if you're willing to look at houses that are a month or maybe a longer down the road, then they're more likely to have more days on market equals more negotiability. So let's let them tell you. But the bottom line is that you're coming up with $12,000 in this particular scenario. And it's a rule of thumb, like 3% in my market for the most part of the sales price is what you're going to rule of thumb come up with. But it doesn't have to come from you. It can come from anybody else and go through the sources of other people that it can come from. So
far and away, the most flexible program that there is in terms of the things that we can do. We're not going to do it tonight because we've done it before, but even to the point of seller can pay off credit cards for you. If like, there's just crazy things that we can do with this. And this is what that pre-approval process should be looking like. You know, it is back and forth. What do you have? Lay your cards on the table. Your lender is going to walk through and say, cool, here's the best way for us to play that hand. Jerry, I am going to throw, this is not even a hypothetical because we get this all the time. And I want you to tell me how you would advise a veteran to make sure this doesn't happen. So Randy just said, hey, we're going to spitball. We're going to throw a payment down. And I'll get it and I'll go, well, payment looks insane. And you look at it and you're like, you're in the great state of Texas and they have $100 a month for your property taxes. That's not super realistic. You are in Tornado Alley and it says $42 a month for your homeowner's insurance. I don't think that's looking too realistic. So we say, as part of your pre-approval, you need to get that full PITI payment so you know exactly what you're going to be writing that check for every month. But what can a veteran do to verify that the numbers they're getting are reasonable and realistic?
Realistically, it's getting out there and shopping for particular rates to compare. Like, is it really truly insurance going to cost me this much for, let's say, this house that I'm interested in? You can start getting quotes beforehand and getting an idea of what those numbers look like. Also, understanding what the actual county property tax base is. Right. If you're a veteran and you don't have a disability rating, then, or you do have a disability rating, but it's under 100%, right? Then in Texas, you're not going to get a full exemption like that. But if you do, then you would have a full exemption. So the numbers need to be accurate. They need to not be askew, because then that's going to deter you or push you towards something that you at the end are not going to feel comfortable once you actually get the real numbers. And I think that that's sometimes the biggest eye opener for some people when they actually start identifying properties that they like, and it just so happens to be either in a flood zone, a fire zone, for us in particular, right? Flood zone and fire, massive.
You might be in
cost.
both in California. You could be in a flood zone and a fire hazard area.
Yeah, I here in Ventura, that's what we have in the hillside. That you have that. And so if you are not aware of those particular things, and you are not having your loan officer at least really dive into what is a safe number, I'd rather overstate what your insurance and taxes are going to, well, not taxes, because taxes, I'll use the either the 1.25% that most lenders want us to be using, or if it's per se Florida, tax base is 3.6 something percent. Okay, well then I'm using that. Right, and I'm always going to err on the side of caution and go with the heavier number, and then in hopes that they find something that's cheaper. Because at the end, that's what our job is to make sure that we give them a realistic picture of what that payment looks like and what the expectation is for them to actually be successful in their home purchase and in sustaining that home moving forward. It's not just about getting in there; it's about being able to hold on to it.
And I have a couple of pieces of advice. I tell people this: ask your loan officer, how'd you get that number? And if they stutter and stammer, probably a pretty good indication that, oh, it came out of my software, or I don't really know, I have no idea. So that's one. If they can tell you, hey, I did this and that's how we get to that, and I would advise on that insurance. Just to give you guys an idea, homeowners insurance, like in the last year, I've probably seen a policy as cheap as $600 a year, and I've probably seen on the high side $17,000 or $18,000 a year. Makes a pretty big difference. I mean, those are obviously very different properties, very different locations, very different risks, but it can be a massive difference. And you know, a lot of times if you're here in California, the range of property taxes is pretty narrow, and what you can look at on Redfin or Zillow is pretty accurate. So you can kind of double check these things yourself. But it's super important, because you don't want to go in. I mean, we get people, the four of us probably all the time, I'm about a week before closing and this payment is $200 higher than what I was told. And you look at it and you go, principal and interest can't change unless they jack the rate up on you from your original numbers. So it's generally in the taxes and insurance. One of the things we don't have on a VA loan is mortgage insurance. So Jessica, we hinted at it before: first time use, subsequent use, zero down, putting money down. The VA funding fee is in lieu of monthly mortgage insurance payments. So explain the role of it, how it's determined, and the idea of financing it, because we're talking about cash to close. You pay it, but you don't generally pay it in cash to close, but you can. So a lot of moving parts there. Walk us through it.
Yeah, so the VA funding fee is the one cost of the loan that truly can be rolled into the loan, because it just is on top. It's the one thing that can be over 100% of your loan to value. The funding fee is either waived or anywhere from 0.5% on an IRRRL all the way to 3.3% on a subsequent use 100% finance. There is a bunch of options with your funding fee. If you have money to put down, you can put 5 or 10% down, and it will lower your funding fee according to however much money you're putting down. So there's lots of options with it. You can pay it in cash. It is your option to do that if you want to, but it is the one part of the loan that can just be rolled in automatically without getting a seller concession or anything like that to cover it. It just is assumed that it's part of the loan unless you specifically ask to not to pay it out of pocket.
And people often ask, what is this? Who gets it? Where does it go? So it's like, I didn't pay it. It got added to my loan. What is this money, and where does it go, and why am I paying it?
So it goes to the VA. It goes directly to them for them to fund this whole program. It's what is your mortgage insurance premium for the VA loan. It's a one-time premium instead of like on an FHA loan, you have an upfront premium that you pay and then you pay monthly. And on conventional loans, you pay it monthly, or you pay it all at once, or you pay it multiple different ways. But for the VA loan, it's only charged one time when you originate the loan and it closes. That's when it's paid directly to the VA, and it goes to support the program itself and to cover losses, like we talked about the foreclosure and things like that. That's what allows them to be able to insure those houses in the program itself.
With that, one thing I want to know, I had an interesting conversation just this morning with an elderly veteran down in Florida. He was a real estate broker for 50 years, so he knows his stuff. He's like, I know this. I don't want to do the VA. I got the funding fee. So we went through it and we're comparing VA to conventional. In his situation, he could do either one. But the VA and that flexibility of the much higher debt to income ratio, he wouldn't have to document a private note that he has. That's going to be a pain in the butt to document. But he's saying, I want to go conventional because of that funding fee. So we showed him the option of getting a lender credit to cover it. So not financing it, but then getting a lender credit. So it ended up, the rate was the same as the conventional loan, but it made it no mortgage insurance. We just had the benefit of the higher debt to income. And of course, he's talking to 8 different people. And one of those 8 people told him, that person's lying to you. You always have to pay the funding fee. And I told him, I said, Austin, I didn't tell you that you don't have to pay the funding fee. I said, we don't have to finance it. You don't have to grow your loan amount. There are other ways of doing this and structuring it. You are 100% paying it. We're just paying it with someone else's money. Does that make better sense? So lots of flexibility, lots of ways that we can work our way through this. So I think we've done a pretty good job of covering most everything. I kind of want to circle back to that idea of what can we do in terms of seller concessions? Because we talked about there's some misconceptions around that. If we're talking about a purchase that has $8,000 or $10,000 or $12,000 of closing costs, Randy, are there any limits to what the seller can do in terms of covering those costs for you?
Well, I think the biggest thing that people have to look at is that the way that the 26.7 reads is it has a 4% limit above and beyond normal closing costs. All right, and typical closing costs, and so you're not looking at the whole amount. And like I said, it's typically 3%, but the limit doesn't exclude the stuff that's normal. So it's not until you get into things like excessive buy downs, etc., that the 4% clock starts even clicking. So I think that's a really big thing that your normal loan officer that doesn't do a lot is going to just tell you. And a lot of times, same with agents, they'll say we can only do 4%. No, that's not true. The clock doesn't start until you're out of the norm on the concessions, and that's why you can cover all the closing costs and pay off debt, because there's a big difference between those two.
And I don't think anyone here is saying it's common. I mean, what is it? 1%, 2% of the time, do you have a situation where a seller might help pay off your debt? But we do have situations, especially in the markets that are a little bit softer right now, where both parties are saying, how can we put this together? What can we do to find a win-win? And again, VA wins. It's the far and away the most flexible of all of those. Jerry, with that,
before you get away from that is when we talked about earlier about making an offer, what I've seen along the lines of what you're talking about is sometimes VA sellers, a veteran seller, sometimes they just really want to help another veteran get in the loan, and they're the ones that are willing to do bend over backwards sometimes to make that kind of stuff happen. So it's not everybody's not cut out the same. Sometimes it's not just veterans, but it's also people that have a heart for veterans that are willing to work with it. So it can. Sometimes people say we don't want to do VA loans, but there's other people that say we really want to help veterans. So it's not necessarily. I've seen some really amazing things that people have done, really out of the goodness of their heart, where they could have sold a home for more and not had as much concessions, etc. But the VA loan had that appeal to them for whatever reason, and it made that work.
And we don't have any of our vetted realtor pros here with us tonight, but that is where a good realtor really is worth their weight in gold, because they're calling the listing agent and they're learning about the sellers. They find out if that seller is a veteran, if they're elderly, they came through, the Vietnam era, and they have a heart for veterans. So all of that stuff does come into play when you're getting an offer accepted, among the millions of other things that a valuable realtor does for you. Oftentimes when we talk about this process, especially when we get someone under contract or we just did the pre-approval, we talk about the do's and don'ts. How about, we're talking, People know, don't go out and buy a brand new car when you put a property under contract. But Jerry, if you're advising someone that wants to buy in June, and we're looking about this now, what are some of the longer terms do's and don'ts, things that you can be doing to put yourself in the best position to successfully close in the spring or summer?
Yeah, a lot of the suggestions that I tend to work with veterans on is pull a copy of your free annual credit report. Get a copy of that. Let's review it. If what you want to do is get yourself in the best position possible, let's review it together. Let's go ahead and tell you what you need to work on, anything that needs to get removed off your credit report because it's an old liability. Can you settle it out? Can you go ahead and do a pay for deletion? Are you able to get that request in? If so, then that'll take care of you, and you have time, right? You have, let's say your purchase is 6 months out. You starting this process now and paying that liability off and getting a pay for deletion might actually come into play in the next 2 to 3 months, where your score starts to jump up. You're utilizing only 20% of your total credit limit. That also will be a huge support. So getting people primed and ready for those kind of positions to maximize what they will be able to qualify for, because they're also getting better terms, better opportunities when they actually go into it, will really streamline everything for them. Then from there, if they're able to, then at that point start saving some additional money just in case. You want to be able to give a good earnest money deposit in case the market gets competitive. And then really just starting to fine tune what it is that you're looking for in a realtor, so that way when you go out there looking for one, you have an idea of what you're wanting, what you're expecting from them, and that you find somebody that's actually going to get you in proper position to make the best possible offers on the homes that you're searching for.
One thing I would add to what you just said, Jerry, too, is before you go out and start paying off those old collections or charge off accounts or something like that, make sure you talk to a professional that's looking at your stuff, because you might be thinking, hey, I'm going to pay this collection off and it's going to make my score go up. Well, actually the exact opposite happens. As soon as you pay off a collection, if you don't get that pay for deletion letter that Jerry was talking about, that collection reports like a brand new collection again, and it may have been 4 years old. Now it's brand new, and your score just went down 40 points because you thought you were helping yourself out. So be very cautious about working on things on your credit. I mean, keep your credit cards paid down. That stuff is great. But as far as paying off anything old, it may be at a point. I have a borrower that we're working with right now. They have a repossessed manufactured home that was 7 years ago, or 6.5 years ago was repossessed. Well, it will fall off of his credit completely after 7 years. And he was like, well, I'm just going to pay it off. I'm going to settle it and I'm going to pay it off. And it was like $35,000. And I was like, you probably shouldn't do that. Let's see if we can qualify you with leaving this on here. And we were able to get him in. It's actually the guy that had the low appraisal, and we got the ROV back. He ended up keeping that repossession on there. And the guidelines allow us just to count a payment for it and say, hey, here's a 5% payment on this. And he qualified with it and didn't have to pay it off. And now that's going to fall off. So for the next time he goes to finance, it's not even going to be an issue. And he didn't spend $35,000 paying off a repossessed manufactured home from 6.5 years ago.
And that's the big thing that I would say that I actually was going to add is don't pay anything down without talking to your loan officer, because a lot of times people, they just say, well, I'm going to pay everything off. And next thing you know, they've done things that are actually counterproductive to what they're trying to do. And they didn't need to do that to make things work. And it may be that they've spent money that would come in handy later. So don't do anything until you talk to your loan officer, because even though you think intuitively that might be the right thing to do, find out for sure. Find someone that you're comfortable working with and say, hey, I was thinking about doing this. No, don't do it.
Strategy.
And what I was going to say is there's no right or wrong answer here. So Jerry said, do the free annual credit report. One of the things I often say is if you're worried where you're at, you don't want an inquiry, we can do a soft pull for you. So if you, just a couple things, as you guys were talking, I'm like, there's so many good points here. It is never too early to talk to a lender. You want to buy next July, talk to a lender now. And maybe you don't want to do it through the holidays, but do it in January. Have that conversation now. pull your own credit report or the benefit of doing a soft pull. Sometimes there's a cost for that, a full 3-bureau soft pull, but it'll tell us where the scores are. If you want to go out and do it yourself, myfico.com, their premium monitoring allows you to get the mortgage scores just like we see. So you can see them without an inquiry. But I understand people feel like a loan officer is going to be a salesperson. They're going to try and push you to buy before you're ready to. All of us have done this forever. So really, it doesn't matter whether you buy in 6 months or 6 years. I'm going to be doing loans. I want to build a relationship with you that I am your trusted resource when that time comes. So if that means looking at your credit now, because you might buy in 6 months or 6 years, that's what it takes. And being able to give you this advice, because Randy mentioned something super important and super easy to miss earlier. I looked at the guy's credit report today and he told me, I've been working on this. I paid everything off. And I'm going through. I'm like, what's going on with these 2 credit cards? They're the 2 littlest ones you have, and they're both maxed. He's like, what are you even talking about? He's like, I paid everything down under 30% of my line, max line to max my scores. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, that is correct, except for this one that is $5 away from being over. And this one has a $300 limit with a $250 amount. He's like, you're crazy. What are you even talking about? I screenshot it. I sent it over to him. Authorized users, both of them. And they were there for a reason, because 5 years ago, he didn't have much credit. So he got added to one of his parents' cards, but they went from being a positive, helping him get a higher score, to a negative. And that one is flip a switch. We have that corrected tomorrow. So all of those little things that you're probably never going to know as a consumer, these 4 nerds or whoever you talk to local in your market know this stuff, because we look at it all the time. So just that guidance of walking through. So it's never too early. Go through it. Don't pay anything without having that conversation. So if you think you're going to pay some stuff off, then you definitely need to have a conversation with a lender up front. But with that, guys, I don't know if any of you feel like there's anything that we didn't cover that would be valuable, but I think this was a really good overview for anyone thinking that 2026 is my year. I'm going to use my VA benefit. I'm going to buy a home. This should give you the big, broad overview. And I think most importantly, set an expectation for you when you sit down with a loan officer, the type of conversation they should have with you and the type of guidance that they can give you. But any final pearls of wisdom you guys would like to share before we let everyone go tonight?
Well, one thing that I wanted to mention is when you're talking to people, a lot of times people don't realize that whenever you talk to someone right up front, you should be asking them how long they have left on their orders, because that's the thing that I see that people paint themselves in a box sometimes, where they're only going to have 12 months left on their orders now, and then they're going to try to buy 4 months from now. You need to educate them on that is a hitch in their good along, that there are some ways around it. And that's where not spending all your money might come in handy, because the 26.7 allows that if you put 10% down, that it may have a positive effect on that situation where that you don't have 12 months left on your orders, that you're going to put a down payment and you can justify it, et cetera, et cetera. There's a way to make that work. Whereas most people, that will just kill them. So just a little thing that is important, that when you talk to people up front, not only that you're eligible, that you got the 36,000 full or whatever bonus entitlement that you need, but also how long you're going to be there and how long you're going to be in the service.
Very good. Jerry, Jessica, anything you want to leave these guys with?
I'll let Jess go first.
She says, thanks for putting me on the spot, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thanks. No, I would just definitely recommend get your COE if you see 36,000, or even if you see 0 entitlement available. That does not mean that you're out of entitlement. If you have 2 or 3 loans on there, you can still get more possibly. So always use your bonus entitlement calculations, check that out. Find out earlier than later. I had one veteran that we worked with a couple months ago that had a VA loan in the past. He was collecting VA disability. And when we went to pull his new COE, they said he wasn't eligible. And we had to go through the VA channels, get his paperwork all figured out. Even with him currently receiving disability income, we still had a bunch of hoops to jump through. So the sooner you can get into your COE and make sure that it's good to go, even if you've used it in the past. There are weird things that happen. It is the government. We don't know where these documents go or where they come from, but you just make sure you have everything in a line, so that way you're not last minute trying to pull your COE and end up losing your purchase or something like that because of it.
Perfect. Jerry, what do you got?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, it is a phrase we all learned as we've grown up is proper preparation prevents piss poor performance, right? So the sooner we get started in prepping you to get yourself right on track for this purchase, the better chances you're going to have of having success. At, at, at the beginning stages, the biggest hurdle you're going to have is getting over your own fears. And a lot of times sharing your personal information with somebody who is a total stranger to you is going to be a hurdle. And it's going to constantly be something that you're doubting yourself whether or not you should be giving them this information. But trust me when I say it, if you ever come to anyone within Vetted VA, my opinion is that all these people, they have a heart of gold. Like they all want to serve, to want to put you and your families in the best possible position for the future. So let us help you. Let us guide you. Give us that opportunity to kind of just show you the way. And then regardless of whether or not you work with us, it doesn't matter. But at least get in front of somebody who's going to have that that intention to just take care of you directly and making sure that they're going to provide you with the best possible advice and support that you can get in order to be properly prepared for that next move.
All great pieces of advice. I want to leave everyone with one last thing that we didn't really talk about, and this isn't unique to VA loans. If you're going to buy a home, especially if it's your first home, do a budget. Stick to a budget for a period of time. You don't have to become the mint.com expert where you track every last penny and know what's going on. And you can do this retroactively. You can go back and pull 3 months of bank statements, credit card statements. ChatGPT can help you with all of this stuff and say, where does my money really go? What is my net income? So I make X, but what do I bring home every month, including if I get a tax refund every year? So we figure that into our cash flow and say, can I really handle this? It's kind of shocking. Most people don't ever budget. I'm not a budgeter, but if I get ready to do something big, I'm going to go and start digging into the numbers, at least here recently. So we have the tools. It's pretty easy. You don't have to be the numbers expert. You can go through it with your loan officer. You can go through it on your own. But do yourself a favor, get that budget in line, get your certificate of eligibility, review your credit, connect with an expert, either a realtor or a lender that can help you. If we can help you with that, go out to vettedva.com. There's a map of people in your area, happy to talk to you, whether you just have questions, whether you're ready to buy tomorrow, whether you want to do it in 2 years. That will help you do, as Jerry said, that proper preparation. So again, appreciate the three of you spending time with me tonight. We will be back next week with another set of pros and another topic to help you guys make the best decisions with your VA benefits. Thanks a lot, guys.